Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you,
How's-
Catherine?
I'm good. How are you, Luciana? You look
I'm
great.
so do
You're
you.
wearing your wintry stuff today, I see.
A little bit. Yeah, it's getting a little cooler here in
Yeah.
Ohio, in the very corrupt state of Ohio.
Yep.
Today's
Yep.
show, episode 26, Groupthink. Look it up. It's called Groupthink. Secret societies, cults, gangs, or communities.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, right off
Before
the
we
bat,
go
we've
any
got some.
further, I just sometimes if there's nothing worse than groups that don't function, there's being alone. And this, I want to just say a quick prayer for those who find themselves um, uh, without wanting to be alone and feeling maybe pretty desperate. I see some people are in that category tonight, and we've all been there. This prayer is for them and for anybody going through a particularly dark time, especially those who feel completely alone. You have more power and freedom than you may think. I will pray for you. And these horrible times that we're going through will not last forever. Our
That's right.
Heavenly Father is with us and with you and all of us who seek Him as we all walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He will take away your fear if you let Him. Blessings. This too shall pass.
Amen. Amen. We've got a few people here that are are joining us today live.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
we
awesome.
um, we have former sheriff. Which county is that, Catherine?
Mineral County, isn't it? Um,
Um,
Good hand.
well, yeah, he's quite popular nowadays, and that is former Sheriff Stuart Hant.
I don't think I'm that popular, but thank you.
You're pretty popular. Hi, Stuart. Like
Hi.
I said, Stuart is a former sheriff. Stuart, which county is it that you were?
Well, if you want to go down my resume briefly, I was a state trooper with Nevada Highway Patrol for 20 years, and I accrued the also a senior state trooper. I was the sheriff of Mineral County, Nevada. I was two tribal chiefs of police. I was an adult probation officer, and I was a deputy sheriff twice for Story County Sheriff's Office. And in between that, I was the senior security advisor for the Hawthorne Army Depot base, where I had to get a secret government clearance. And let me tell you, ladies, that takes about 8 months. And I had accrued 30 years of law enforcement experience. The last job, I was the chief of police for Redeeming Sparks Indian Colony, when I believe the cabal, who we have now uncovered, is directly involved in the arrest of Roger Hilligus and myself, that have led to the murder. And I don't say that word lightly tonight, folks. The murder of Susan Hilligus.
That's right. They've admitted to it.
We have the evidence to prove it. We've acquired the evidence, and I've said all along, ladies, and whoever else is listening tonight, I firmly believe that the shadow players that have been behind the scenes with both the rest of Roger and myself in incarceration. Roger Hilligus' birthday is today, by the way. He is spending
Ah,
he is spending it in the Washoe County Jail at the hands of torturers, people who wear the badge, and they're disgusting, reprehensible examples. And I've been in that jail, so I know exactly what he's going through. They are trying to kill him because they've already killed Susan. They kill Roger. They only have one left to play with, and that's me. I'm out. Right now, I'm out. However, ladies and everybody else listening, recently I served 9 days in jail for going outside the boundaries of Washoe County without getting permission. And I served 9 days in jail, which caused me to lose my job. So basically right now I'm unemployed, trying to find gainful employment. This is how diabolically evil and sinister these people are, Catherine and Luciana. They
Yeah.
were not going to stop on nothing until we're dead and buried. They tried to strong arm us into a nolo contendere plea agreement. And I'm sorry I went off on a tangent here, but we were almost signed it. Roger, I looked at Roger and I saw defeat in the man's eyes. I said, Roger, if that's good with you, let's get it done with. But we didn't know that they were planning a trap. And had we signed that plea agreement, we'd both be in prison right now, and we'd probably be dead. So,
Wow.
yes, 30 years of law enforcement. They can't take that away from me. They have tried, and I'm sick and tired of this garbage. And now I'm on the warpath, And now I'm not afraid to speak out even more. Let them come for me. You know, I call my own shots here at the end, at this particular end of the cycle of this. It's a Black Robe Mafia. It's the American Bar Association. Catherine, you said it many times. So have you, Luciana. It's the American Bar Association, State Bar Association. It's the Black Robe Mafia. They are the corrupt criminals in this country. And in order for us to be successful, we have to defeat them in every way, shape, or form.
Okay. Thank you so much, Stuart, for being so honest and for coming forward and speaking your truth. And for those
and standing up for your friend when it would have been a lot easier to have looked the other way.
And you know, ladies, this afternoon, I sent a very sharply worded email to my attorney, and he basically came back to me with the audacity and brazenness of a reprehensible cur and said, my advice to you is to distance yourself from Roger Hillegas at this point for strategy. I went, I didn't respond. I could not respond. You know why? Because a lot of bad words are coming out of my mouth, and I felt it's best to shut up right now, cool my jets. I'm going to respond back tomorrow and say, now I'm going to show you, Mr. Silverberg, your public pretender, the evidence to show you that this is a conspiracy, that you're involved in this, and if you don't do the right thing, I'm going to file complaints against you, and I'm coming after you with both barrels loaded and cocked.
All I could say right now, seriously, and my heart bleeds for what they are putting you through and what they're putting Roger through. But I hope that any other officer or prosecutor or anybody watching this, and I'm sure many are going to, that they are listening to your words. You are a former sheriff with many, many years behind your belt of service, you know, to so many, and and for them,
you were, I'm sure, actually doing enforcement,
helping someone out. This is insane. But
Catherine, it is insane. And let's go down the list. Roger first. Roger lost his father. Roger lost his mother. Don't know if he ever had a relationship with his sister. Roger lost his wife. Roger lost his property. Roger lost his animals. Roger lost everything you could lose and still be alive as a man. I lost my marriage because of this. I lost a tenuous relationship I had with a person I used to call my daughter. And it's very difficult for me to say. 2 days from now would have been my 12th wedding anniversary, but the divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. I lost personal property I really don't care about. But I did lose my animals. And 2 of them are no longer with us. They've crossed over the Rainbow Bridge. And that's one of the main parts that drives me. They took away what I truly loved about life, and that's taking care of 4-legged creatures that were my kids. Right. And I tell you, you can hear it right now. For me to sit here and tell that story, and now it's been a couple of years since I've lost my dog, and about 1.5 years since I lost my cat, 2 years since I lost my marriage, and about 2 years since I lost my relationship with my daughter. It still hurts. And I grieve tonight for Roger, because Roger's in jail and he's being subjected to torturous treatment by these excuses of law enforcement officers.
And we're speaking of Roger Hillegas. Yes, Roger Hillegas, who is presently imprisoned in, what jail is he in?
Reno, Nevada.
Washoe County Jail, Reno, Nevada, under the direct dictatorship, and I'll say it's dictatorship, of Sheriff Darren Balaam, who was a mentor of my arch enemy and nemesis, Richard Kirkland, who, by the way, Mr. Matt Scarlatta's just found out this afternoon, after going through a batch of discovery evidence that was given to Roger. Lo and behold, 22 years after I blew the whistle, federal whistleblower, Mr. Kirkland, we found evidence to show that he's involved in this.
Jesus.
And this is what
Apparently, Mr. Balaam has been replaced now with 1 or 2 other people.
Darren Balaam, last I checked, Catherine, I don't, when did this happen?
Roger mentioned that to me, and I looked it up, and the new ones are Andrew Barron-Venn, V-E-N-N, and Sandra Barbosa, who I think is a NAF care worker.
Stuart, just real quick, because everyone
yeah.
who's going to watch this doesn't know what happened. Just real quick, because some people can't do their own research. Can you just real quick give a quick synopsis? Why is Roger Hilligus being held in the Reno, Nevada jail for over a year now? And why have you been implicated in assisting him? People don't know. Just real quick, let them know what happened.
Part one, Roger's being held in jail illegally. He's being held as a dictatorship of one judge, Barry Lewis Breslow, who's the presiding judge in our criminal case here, Second Judicial District Court, Department 8. That entire court system, by the way, is corrupt. So therefore, I'm going to leave it there. Roger refused to cow down, to a court-ordered mental health evaluation, when in actuality, the judge needs to have a mental health evaluation. If you look at the YouTube video on January 13th of 2022, you'll see exactly what I'm saying.
But this started because he tried to protect and save his mother, right?
Well, yes, we started, he asked, just a coincidence, no such thing as coincidence, I believe God intervened. I met him in an attorney's office in Reno. He asked me to help him with a traffic citation. I said, just pay it. And then he brought his mother into the situation. And I says, that sounds a little bit more serious than traffic violation. And he says, well, you're a law enforcement officer. I go, no, I'm not anymore, but let me see what I can do. So we sat down, he presented pictures of his mother in disheveled clothing. He said that he would go there and routinely change her diapers when nobody else would. And she had a black eye. We've also found out she was transported to the hospital 3 times now without him being notified. So what I did for Roger is I set up a meeting with the Reno Police Department. Yes, folks, I set up a meeting with the cops. It's like a bank robber going to the police. Hey, listen, I'm going to rob the bank at 3 o'clock. Okay with you guys? Sure, no problem. So Roger went there. He said it was a civil problem, but why don't you go up there and try and mediate the situation? He had these documents from We the People. He presented them to the staff there. I saw it. We walked Mrs. Hilligus out of the facility. And when it went from a civil problem to a criminal matter within 5 hours, there was a silver alert issued for Roger. He had taken his mother down to Los Angeles County area, and the entire Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office team was deployed to kill him. And I mean that, folks, to kill him. He was green lighted based on the lies of the cops here. Again, a conspiracy. So all I did was go into the facility with Roger, signed in appropriately, and we left with Mrs. Hilligus on his arm. Because of Roger's current situation, the judge has ordered him a mental health evaluation. He said, go take a long walk off a short pier. And he was on the run for about 9 months. He was taken down outside Jefferson City, Missouri by a massive amount of law enforcement. They were going to kill him there too. So that was my involvement with assisting Roger. Roger is currently being held in jail on a no bail hold for failing to submit to a mental health evaluation because they thought he was incompetent. Well, guess what? He's been deemed competent. So why they hold him now? That's a $64,000 question. Everybody on this broadcast and everybody that's listening in tonight needs to send a missive out to Judge Barry Breslow. I'll provide the email address to say, why are you holding Mr. Hilligus on a no bail hold when he's mentally competent? And then know what they're going to say, Catherine and Luciana? They're going to say, because he's a flight risk. Well, no kidding, folks. He's a flight risk because he didn't want to commit to a mental health evaluation when, in fact, a mental health evaluation.
Well, what you're leaving out, Stuart, and I know you've been in the system for a long time, is none of these people have any authority to do any of what they have done. And the sheriff's department, and you probably didn't know it, just like when I worked for the as an officer of the court, I thought it was really a court. It wasn't. It was a private for-profit corporation, just like Barry Breslow's so-called court is not really a court. It doesn't meet the definition of being a court according to their Black's Law Dictionary. It's a business. It's a for-profit business. So it's the sheriff's department, so-called. They're all businesses for profit. So they're acting accordingly, just as any corporate board room would do.
Can I ask you a question, Catherine? Have you ever heard of a QSPID file?
Yes.
Well, that's being pulled up on my case because I told my public pretender yesterday, hey, I heard my case is being traded on the New York Stock Exchange. He goes, what are you talking about? I go, ooh.
Really?
Yeah. I go, yeah, I never heard you stutter and stammer before. Yeah.
Wow.
I said, well, guess what? I said, guess what, Mr. Silverberg? In due time, I'm going to have the QSPID report, and then we'll discuss more about it. He never said a word after that to me.
Wow, Stuart, Stuart, you are big and bad and bold and blessed by God. That's
Yes,
all I got to
I am
say.
blessed by God.
And
You know,
God will continue blessing you, and we continue praying for you, Stuart. Thank
let,
you.
before
How
I
did you
answer,
find your QSIP number, right,
Did you
Stuart?
find it?
no, William Wagner, who I believe you both know, William Wagner's sister, Adriana Gutierrez, no, it's not Adriana, it's Estevez, Adriana Estevez, who is a former attorney like you, Catherine, from the state of California, uh, reached out to me. Now, let me tell you, we all believe in God here. The other morning, as I was driving to a job interview, I saw the biggest rainbow I've ever seen in my life in Reno, over the entire city. After that, a double
Beautiful.
rainbow. And when Adriana Estevez called me out of the blue, I did not know who this lady was. William Wagner was on the line. And she goes, I'm going to ask you a question right now, Stuart. She goes, do you believe in God? I go, absolutely, I do. I believe in God every day. She goes, did God show you a message this morning that he's protected you? I said, he did. He sent me a double rainbow. He goes, and she goes, as a result of that message, did you find something that was positive to end your day? I go, I was offered a job. So God is in work. And let me tell you, it choked me up right
Absolutely.
now to say that it's absolutely 100% God is watching over all of us, Catherine, Luciana, the
Yes.
gentleman who just,
Amen.
and I'm going to tell you something.
Amen.
I, I have a mantra that I live by, and I want Roger to live by too. Get busy living or get busy dying. It's a simple
Mm.
choice. And I choose.
I want to bring this back to actually the topic
Okay,
that
go ahead. Thank you.
we're
Thank you
supposed
very
to be
much.
addressing tonight, which
Thank you,
is
Stuart.
thank you. But yeah, anybody feel free to interject, at least through chat, if we're deviating from the topic. But I think that as much as we're seeing evil, pathological behavior by members of the cabal, it's so much worse. It's like on steroids when they act in a group. And there's a, yeah. And whatever it is, good as well as evil can be amplified by this concept known as groupthink, which was a term that was coined a few years back. I think we've always known about it. There's a guy, a psychologist, this is a social psychology concept by Dr. Janis, I think, Janis, Irving Janis from Yale. But there have been other experiments done. Some of them, many of them, sponsored by the military or other portions of the cabal for their own purposes and to produce results that they wanted. And I would just wanted to kind of go over that at least lightly.
Okay.
The whole concept of groupthink is that when you're in a group, you tend to suppress your own individuality and your own creativity in order to conform to what you perceive is the behavior of the group. And Luciana, you want to play that clip?
Yes.
I think it's really short
Yep.
from
It's
the
short.
basic experiment called the ASH experiment,
Yes.
where done on randomly selected college students back in, I don't know, the 60s, was it?
Oh, I forget what year it was. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
should it?
the original ASH experiment.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and play this,
Yeah,
okay?
there it is. There it
Yep.
is.
Okay, here we go.
But an experiment is not a public opinion poll.
Can you
It
hear it?
examines behavior under the pressure of
Yes.
social forces, as the experiment of Solomon Asch reveals.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length. All right, we'll proceed in this order. You'll give your answer.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the fifth person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
Two, two, two,
Two.
three,
Three.
3.
3.
But on the third trial, something happens.
2.
2. 2.
2. 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
1.
Ash found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
1.
1.
They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment. He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1.
1.
1.
2.
1. 2. 2.
2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2.
In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group. Here, the distortion is at the level of his response.
2.
2.
2.
2.
In the previous experiment, the naive subject stood alone against the group. In this variation, Ash gave the naive subject a partner, here seated in the third position, who also gives the correct response.
1.
1. 2.
1.
2.
With a partner, yielding drops to only 5% of the critical trials compared to 37% without a partner. Although subjects report warmth and good feeling toward the partner, they typically deny that he played a role in their own independence. The partnership variation shows that much of the power of the group came not merely from its numbers, but from the unanimity of its opposition. When that unanimity is punctured, the group's power is greatly reduced. Sometimes we go along with the group because what they say convinces us they are right. This is called informational conformity. But sometimes we conform because we are apprehensive that the group will disapprove if we are deviant. This is called normative conformity. The strength of the normative factor is shown in another variation carried out by Ash. In this variation, the subject is told that because he had arrived late, he would have to write his answers. Subjects in this private response experiment are exposed to the same amount of misleading information as other subjects, but they are immune from any possible criticism by the group.
1.
1. 1.
And this enormously reduces the pressure to conform. Conformity drops by 2/3. Ash's experiment is a classic. It reveals how people will deny what they see and submit to group pressure. It allows us not only to observe conformity, but to study the conditions that increase or reduce its occurrence.
Okay, thanks, Luciana. That gives you some idea of the power that a group can have, and when there's not perfect uniformity, when you have an ally in the group, it can help you to stand up for yourself. After that, I think it was after that. No, it might have been, before the Ash study. It was in response to how could the atrocities of World War II and Auschwitz have happened? And that was the Milgram experiment. But in the case of the Milgram experiment, which was supported financially by the military, they had an agenda. They wanted this to be proof that within all of us is a jackbooted thug just waiting to come out and inflict harm on their fellow man. What in that experiment, that's more of an obedience experiment rather than it's partly a conformity experiment, but it's also an obedience experiment.
Right.
And if you want to put up the interview with the woman who blew the whistle on how the results of the Milgram experiment were rigged, so that because they were widely disseminated among quite a few people. I mean, I knew about it when I was in college, and it causes you to really mistrust your fellow man, because after all, they might turn on you, and they, as a result of this experiment, they apparently will are willing to administer an electric shock just because an authority figure in a white coat tells them to. But that's not exactly what happened. That's how they tried to rig the experiment. So you just play some of that of her interview.
Sure. Okay, hold on one second.
She went through the raw data, and this, the lying part of the Milgram experiment is what gets the publicity, of course. This part, that it was rigged, gets hardly any press, as usual. The truth doesn't sell very much.
Okay.
So, while we're waiting on that,
why else would 900 people drink poisoned Kool-Aid?
No. This is just a recap of the Ash experiment.
And the Holocaust.
Okay, is this not the right one?
Right, it's the next one.
Okay, sorry about that.
But while she's finding that, I want to
is it okay? Go ahead.
It's the Milgram experiment. It's the interview with the psychologist that studied the raw data.
All right. Okay. Hold on one second.
Okay. So.
Okay. The Milgram
experiment revisited, right? Or exposed or something like that.
Yeah, I have. It says Fascinating Nouns, episode 213, the Milgram Obedience Experiments with Gina Perry. Is that it?
I think so. I'm pretty sure it is.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
All right.
Okay.
Before we look at that, or while she's putting it up, just a little item in the news, very, very bizarre. And you all might want to think about your interpretations of how that happened. Four police employees, police officers in Los Angeles County. And remember, the so-called Los Angeles County Sheriff is one of the Roger Hilligas's admitted murderers. The murders of his mother. Anyway, there were 4 deaths on the same day, all ruled suicides of Los Angeles cops. This was just reported in the last 24 hours, I believe.
Insane.
So, what was this, a suicide pact?
Okay.
I mean, we know about the
all right, we're having technical
blue line
difficulties
that
again.
you can't pass through, and
okay, just a moment.
Well, Catherine, that goes to show you that some people will take the coward's way out instead of fight these people. And I'm pretty sure they've said, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to bow down to the evil and collect my paycheck and continue to buy all the neat stuff associated with my job? Or I'm in a predicament. And instead of fighting them as united as a group, which we are doing, they chose the coward's way out. Said, I can't deal with this at one hand. I can't deal with it on another. So I'll take the coward's way out. That's too bad.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And for those of you that don't know, that news just came out with the, I believe it was the LA County, within 24 hours, 4 LA County Sheriff's deputies, I believe it is, committed suicide within 24 hours. This just happened. I mean, that's too much of a coincidence. 4 within 24 hours of each other. This
now,
just happened.
It could have been a hit, 4 hits,
Could be.
clumsily disguised as suicides.
And the question here is, without an investigation, why are they automatically investigating it as suicides? All 4 of them investigating right away. They're investigating these as suicides. I mean,
Luciana?
Right.
yeah,
And who's doing the investigation?
Yeah.
internally, yeah.
Speaking from a law enforcement standpoint, every death call you get sent to, and again, 30 years of being a cop, every death call you get sent to is considered suspicious until you prove otherwise. Every death call you get sent to is suspicious until you can prove.
I can hardly hear you. Every death is
every death call you get sent to is considered suspicious under law enforcement rules and regulations as a suspicious death until you can prove otherwise. If you can't prove otherwise, then it's not a suicide. And most death cases are investigated, and they're not deemed suicides unless it's blatantly clear. And like you said, Catherine, it could be possible suicide, but you don't give that out at 24 hours. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. I wouldn't think.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to go ahead and play this?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get this Milgram thing, because this was the purpose of this was to contaminate a whole generation or several generations against their fellow man.
Yeah. Okay, Catherine. Yeah, this one is an hour long, so I'll start. You let me know. Is there a certain part to go to, or just start it?
Just start it, and we'll go about 5 minutes into it. Maybe.
Okay. Okay.
Please. Initiating broadcast of Fascinating Nouns in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fascinating Nouns. Now, if you are listening to this transmission, we are still the galaxy's most trusted source for incredible people, places, things, and ideas. Now, together we arrive at this curious nexus point, and we will explore the strange, unusual, offbeat, bizarre, intriguing, interesting, invigorating, quirky, quaint, quizzical, weird, wild, wacky, the fun, the frivolous, and the fringe, plus all the spaces in between. I am your host, Daniel.
I think we could do without this intro, but anyway.
Yeah.
Hello, Fascination. Welcome to the show. So when I started college, I was a psychology student. And of course, when you're a first-year student, they teach you all about the experiments that really defined human nature, or at least uncovered a fundamental truth unknown before that experiment. On the top of that list, the Milgram obedience experiments, where an authoritarian experimenter is able to convince the subject to keep giving shocks to a person behind a mirror, past the point of a heart attack to the point of death, or at least that's what the conclusion of the experiment is meant to teach us. Is this true? Is it not? Well, today we're going to find out the answer to that question, because Gina Perry, who you might remember from our episode on the Robbers Cave experiment, is back on the show to talk about her deep dive into the Milgram experiment. And in fact, she came in as an admirer. She kind of turned around on Milgram. So what made her make that change? We're going to follow that journey today. I'm very excited to get into this because I too was enamored by this experiment and found it to be incredibly interesting. So let's get right to it. Gina, thank you so much for being on the show today. Well, this is very exciting, not only for me, Gina, but for you as well, because today, August 27th, August 28th for you, marks your introduction into the Fascinating Nouns Two-Timers Club. This is your second time on the show, so I want to get your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, if you're able to keep them in check. How do you feel about that?
Oh, very excited to be back a second time. I feel like it's a great honor, and I'm doing my country proud.
You certainly are. Absolutely. And this is, speaking of proud, you've got to be proud of this book, Behind the Shock Machine. Now, I know this is, you put this out a while ago. I think it was 2012, I believe. But this is an evergreen book because it's about the Milgram experiments, who for some reason, and I can't tell you why, Gina, in my notes, for about 75% of your book, when I was taking notes, I kept writing Milligram, Miligram. And I realized I was misspelling it. But these are the famous obedience experiments that, are a piece of social psychology history. And
why don't you skip over his ego?
Research on this. You went to Yale. You interviewed former subjects, associates of Milgram, and even his
Yeah, she interviewed test subjects.
different place, you know,
Okay,
emotionally.
let's see.
But it's funny because that's kind of what Milgram did. Is he had this idea. Get through social interactions with people by rehearsing them over and over and over and finding all the permutations of the way a conversation can go. And that's just, you know, one type of avant-garde social experiment, which, you know, at the time when Milgram was doing this was an avant-garde social experiment, very, very on the cutting edge. And
Well,
before we go into that, I want to mention that Milgram was
lets
also
her
a
talk.
pioneer of the small world theory
Okay,
and the 6 degrees.
I'm sorry. What was that, Catherine?
Can you cut to where he lets her talk?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Probably here. Let's see.
Excluded results that didn't support his theory.
There you go.
Okay.
Some are bad people. Some are extremely good people, right? But there's you don't know. But typically, when you put anyone on a pedestal, they're going to disappoint you at some point because no one can live up to the ideals that you set for them. They're just normal people, and I think Milgram probably was pretty normal. I think. I don't know. You did the research, but I feel like he was probably pretty normal.
Well, I think we've got to distinguish between the person and the scientist. And my disillusionment was with his science. And I was very surprised to find that he had, for example, shaped a particular narrative, that he'd excluded results that didn't support his theory. You know, maybe, as you say, we're more alert to that now, but I certainly didn't expect it on the scale that it was. And I also, it wasn't just Milgram, it was the generations of scholars who came after Milgram who never really turned a critical eye on that research, who parroted the results, made connections for the power of the experiments, whereas some of the things were really hidden in plain sight, I felt, once I'd gone through the material very closely.
Right,
I felt that there were serious questions that should have been asked way before. And I'm not saying here that I was the only person. There certainly have been scholars in the decades between who have raised questions, but if you don't have access to the archival material, then the scientist has the last word.
Well, you know what? You know what was kind of interesting about what you're saying and about reading the book is that, hopefully I don't get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think this is a good point to talk about this. Is that, you know, you said you went and looked at the behind the scenes, right? And that's an important thing to say, because the way you kind of paint the picture of Milgram in the book is that he loved the arts, he loved theater. This experiment was almost less an experiment and more of, you know, avant-garde theater, you know, like what's the word I'm looking for? I had it written down later on, but you know, it's kind of like what Andy Kaufman did, a performance artist, right? Like he wanted to prove something. He wanted to do something cool. He wanted to see if he could get a certain reaction out of people. And, you know, this was heavily influenced by the Adolf Eichmann, I think I'm saying that properly, trials that were going on that were, you know, left over from World War II and the Nazis. And I think he was very fascinated with this idea that average people can do horrible things without being horrible people. And in some ways, I think that's why this intrigues us. You know, I was like you. I mean, I studied psychology early on in college. This was one of my one of the experiments that's always taught, along with the Zimbardo experiment, which is another wacky one. And I think that this intrigues us at some level, in some ways terrifies us, because what if there is this evil that is inside of all of us, or at the very least, what if there's an apathy that can be weaponized as evil by those who are more malicious and manipulative around us? And I think that's why it's intriguing. And I think maybe that's what he was going for in his own roundabout way. Less science, more razzle-dazzle.
Well, you mentioned a reality TV program that you called a social experiment. And Milgram borrowed himself from very early reality TV. And he used the techniques of that in his experiment. And I think reality TV has borrowed enormously from experiments like Milgram's today. So there's always been a very blurry boundary between his kind of experiment and a popular entertainment. I take your point.
Yeah.
Yes, it seems to tackle big issues, but scientifically, it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And that is a very troubling part about the experiment, is that what we're taught to believe about the Milgram experiment actually isn't what the results demonstrate. And in a sense, yes, Milgram found what he wanted to, but he found it by shaping, editing, and crafting a narrative. The same way you could say a reality TV show does the same. They leave a lot of things out on the cutting room floor to present a particular story. And I don't really, I really see the parallels there more strongly. Yeah, he was a very artistic person, into experimenting with particular drugs at particular times
Right.
during his career, which I do think at times affected his judgment. Yeah, so he was an interesting man. I certainly don't dispute that, but I think the science side of it is very troubling.
Well, I think what's troubling is you suggesting that The Bachelor is not a documentary, that somehow producers are crafting this love story on screen. How dare you suggest such a thing, Gina? That's terrible.
Okay, I think we get the flavor of that. But it brings up something else too about, how much of what we think is life, or the parts of life that we're exposed to that affect us are really like stage productions, like reality TV. Parts of it end up on the cutting room floor. That's when they start talking about that just hit me hard, that this is very much like what you do when you present a matter to a jury, for example.
Right. Did you want me to continue playing it?
No,
okay.
No, got that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, there's a whole lot that a jury in a fake corporate tribunal doesn't get to hear. And and who gets to make that cut? Well, this is the Black Robe Wonder that gets to make that cut. And even before that, a lot of the actual evidence is screened out by the members of the Bar Guild. So, the jurors are only, and they're already programmed to go a certain way anyhow, but they're further conditioned by the shaping of the evidence, so that they only get bits and pieces of it put together in a choreographed manner to produce a specified result that is, desired by either side. And the theory is, let's say in a so-called criminal trial, that the prosecution puts its distorted version of the evidence before the jurors, and then the defense puts its distorted version of the evidence before the jurors. And out of those two distortions, we're going to get truth somehow.
Right.
Now, that's why what we do, with what ideally would happen with a common law court, is that that slicing and dicing and editing and a whole bunch of stuff going on the cutting room floor doesn't happen. So you're letting the jurors make their own decision about what's important about the facts and the law. So anyway, these decisions are about what's going to be displayed and what is not going to be displayed in the script are group decisions. They're made by committee.
Right.
and that the committee is comprised of people who are in a group, that it has some internal cohesiveness. And even when the group narrative is false, group members are going to adhere to it for the sake of uniformity, for the sake of not being punished by the group themselves, for the sake of cohesiveness. So seems like we lost a lot of people all of a sudden.
Yeah, some of them turn their
Yeah.
cameras off while we were showing that. Former sheriff. Oh, here he is. Hey, Stuart. Okay, so Stuart, you want is your mic on? Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, so again, we have former sheriff Stuart Hant, and Stuart wanted us to share his email and phone number if anyone wanted to contact him. And he shared that in the private chat. And I asked Stuart, I said, did you want me to share that publicly? And Stuart said, I have nothing to hide and want many to know how evil these people truly are. And we thank you, former Sheriff Stuart Hant, for being so honest. Go ahead, Stuart.
If it wasn't for you and Catherine and everybody else listening tonight, we wouldn't be in the position we are now. And I believe in the position we are now. And my friend Allie Carino is listening too. She told me to turn off my camera. I'm walking around the house. I don't really settle down, ladies, until it hits me like a ton of bricks, because I've always operated that way. You know, law enforcement, that's just that nature of the beast.
Right.
First and foremost, God bless everybody listening. God bless you too, first and foremost. God bless everybody listening. The only way we take these people down is a concerted effort, and we keep fighting because God's guiding us. And I truly believe God is guiding us. I believed it almost from the start. I had a little bump in the road. I admit that. But you know what? I've come back with fervor. And it is what the Bible describes as good versus evil. It is the devil versus God.
Absolutely.
It's not those. I don't call them, Luciana. I don't call them people that have incorporated the devil's aspects. I call them actual disciples of the devil. They are evil from the get-go. They have like a ticking time bomb, and somewhere down the road their fuse gets lit, and then it goes off. It may be 10 years old, it may be 15, 20, but when it goes off, there's no turning back. And I firmly believe that. So everybody that's been wronged, and again, tonight's Roger's birthday. There is no way on this earth that man who has suffered so much and lost so much should be spending his birthday in a reprehensible place called the Washoe County Sheriff's Office Detention Facility, run by a Hitler by the name of, and by the way, Catherine, Captain Bennett Venn Bennett, whatever. I got a problem. I've never really seen a man's last name hyphenated before. I'm just going to leave that out there. It causes me concern.
Baron
Bennett. Yeah, he and I have had run arounds. He is not in charge of the facility. It's Darren Balaam still, unless he's been assassinated in the last 24 hours. So, yes, Roger's being tortured tonight because of his stand and for trying to save his mother. He's being tortured.
Stuart, when is Roger's birthday? And again,
Today.
For everyone, wow, what a coincidence that we're doing this show. And so happy birthday to Roger Hillis, who is being wrongly incarcerated for trying to save his mother. And we have Stuart Hant here, who is a former sheriff and went with Stuart Hant to try to save his mother. When afterwards that he was, they were both arrested and charged with kidnapping Stuart's mother. This is
Catherine.
The true kidnappers actually kidnapped Roger's mother, and within a couple of months managed to kill her, as many in this predatory probate racket are doing. Managed to do that within a 2-month period.
This
is it is evil. It is evil defined. It's evil spelled out. It's capitalized. It's underlined. It's bold. Whatever font you want to use, I'll use the biggest font in the world. And we have, and I'm being reminded not to talk about the merits of the case. I'm not going to. I'm just saying the corruption is at all three levels of the government here: the law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and the courts. And I won't go into any more merits because they're trying to box me in by saying I'm talking about the merits of the case. Well, a lot of the stuff is already out there, but Ms. Carino is right. I will not talk about the merits of the case, but I will say this: Roger's health is pretty much gone. And I see a man who was once 6'2" and about at least 210 pounds. Folks, tonight, the last time I saw him in court, he was still standing tall. 6'2" He's about 150 pounds, if that.
Wow.
He was in a wheelchair. He is suffering from vertigo. He has had abdominal pain now. He has had high blood pressure. And these people don't care because, like I said, at the beginning of this broadcast, and I'll step away after this. If you get rid of all the people involved, the culpability aspect is never brought forth. The evil is allowed to continue, and they don't have to write the check, because the check, whether we think it or not, I'm naive to the fact that these people will go to jail. I would like to see him go to jail. I would like to see him face the same repercussions that Roger and I have. However, until we wipe the slate clean, some of them might go to jail. Most of them will not. But where we hit them and where they treasure most is their pocketbooks. And that will bring them down. And then everybody can be made whole, and we continue our efforts. My destiny is already forwarded for me. I intend to, once this case is defeated and we win, I intend to travel the countryside and be an advocate for everybody and anybody who needs me. That's my goal. That's what God told me to do. And I'm going to follow God's wishes.
God bless you for that. And Catherine too, an attorney of 40 years. We got a former sheriff of so many years and a former attorney of 40 years standing up, trying to speak some truth. So I hope many are listening and learning. Go ahead, Catherine. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to get into briefly about the Stanford prison experiment, which followed, I don't know, a decade or a decade and a half or two after Milgram. It was supposed to be a mock prison experiment, but in fact, what we're seeing and assuming to be reality now is all mock. It's all a fake imprisonment because these people do not have authority. And I'm aware I have a difference of opinion about strategy with Stuart, and I understand that when you get yourself locked into the system, when you've been part of the system, you've been, duped by the system, as I was. It's hard to come out from under that, and that's what we have to do. And God is very clear in a number of ways that we do not partake of their iniquities, and part of partaking of their iniquities is participating in their so-called trials, rising when the black robe demon comes into the room. This is idolatry, and we have to deal. If we're going to find a solution, we have to deal with the reality. Look up your local tribunal that you think is a court on Dun and Bradstreet and see what the reality is.
Right. And you speak about idolatry when everybody rises, when the black robed wonder walks into the courtroom. Not only that, it's standing before that, I don't even want to say what I would call them, but to stand and call these black robed wonders, to call them your honor. They have no honor. They have no honor whatsoever. I'm sorry, but I can't think of any of them who do.
Public servant.
They know what's going on, and they continue the charade that's hurting innocent children, innocent elderly people, and the thievery and federal crimes by these so-called judges is out of control, and to stand before one of them and call them your honor. I mean, the only one that I completely honor is the Lord our God, and that's the way it should be.
That's right.
Call them public servants. That's what they are. Public servants. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, they're not even that. They're just agents of a service corporation that one of the public servants hired and outsourced. So they're not even directly public servants. So they're not even that.
Would you call them Mr. or Mrs. or Miss? Is that what you call them?
I might say ma'am or sir.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Works for me.
But I'm not going to call them your honor. No.
Why not? Or call them by their name. Barry. I mean, what's the judge's name? I mean,
Barry.
Right. Yeah, Barry.
John Smith. Go up, call him John Smith, Mr. Smith, Johnny. What's up, John?
Yeah.
I mean, they act like they are deserving of such honor and such respect, yet they disrespect almost every one of us.
And we have to stop using the names that they assign to us, like being a person, because all their statutes are written for persons. God is no respecter of persons, and that's written in various forms throughout the Bible. A person is a role. It's a title. It's a fiction. And they know that they don't have any authority over living men and women. That's why there's the terms man and woman are not found in their statutes and codes. So, if you agree to be one of those, to pretend to be a legal fiction person, you're saying, I'm just bending over for you. I'm just letting you do whatever you want to me. I'm accepting your assignment of a title for me. And I'm accepting that I will play that role for you. And we have to stop playing those roles.
Right. Do you want me to go ahead and play the Stanford Prison Project? That's very short as well. That's not long at all. I think it's
well, I sent you a final. I have two of them. The one that was part of the email with the other emails is a short kind of it's about a 5-minute deal that gives you a summary of what happened. And then there's a few interviews with the actual participants in the study.
So
in a separate email that I sent you after that.
Right. Okay, so I'll go ahead and play the actual study. All right.
You're going to play the
first one.
The first one.
Yeah, because it's just 5 minutes. So we understand what we're going into. Okay.
Right.
Can you see that? Okay.
Let me see. Yeah.
Right now. Sometimes the best way to assess how people will behave and perform within a particular environment is to create that environment and study them like you would rats in a lab. That's exactly what happened at Stanford University in the early 1970s, when a research group wanted to investigate the psychological effects of power and authority between prisoners and prison wardens. Today, we'll take a closer look at how that went down in this episode of the infographic show, The Stanford Prison Experiment. The Stanford Prison Experiment was conducted at Stanford University between August 14th and 20th, 1971, by a research group led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo, who ran his experiment with a group of unsuspecting college students. It was funded by the United States Office of Naval Research as an investigation into the causes of difficulties between guards and prisoners in the United States Navy and United States Marine Corps. The aim was to investigate how readily people would conform to the roles of guard and prisoner in a role-playing exercise that simulated prison life. In particular, Zimbardo wanted to find out whether the brutality reported among guards in American prisons was due to the sadistic personalities of the guards or whether it had more to do with the prison environment. So how did he go about creating this laboratory prison? Zimbardo converted a basement of the Stanford University Psychology Building into a mock prison and then advertised for volunteers to participate in a study of the psychological effects of prison life. More than 70 applicants were interviewed and given personality tests until 24 ideal test subjects had been chosen. They were all male students who were paid $15 per day to take part in the experiment. The group was then randomly split into prisoners and guards. One dropped out, leaving 10 prisoners and 11 guards and 2 reserves. The guards worked 8-hour shifts in sets of 3, and the prisoners were housed 3 to a cell. There was solitary confinement for prisoners who broke the rules in an attempt to keep the mock prison as authentic as possible. To make it even more realistic, the college students were arrested at their own homes and taken to the local police station. They were fingerprinted, photographed, and booked before being blindfolded and driven to the psychology department of Stanford University and led to the basement prison. They were then stripped naked and had all their personal possessions removed, which were locked away. They were given prison clothes and bedding, and they were referred to by their number only. All this was done without warning, to shock the test subjects so their reactions were as if this were a real-life situation and they were real prisoners. The guards were dressed in identical uniforms, they carried a whistle around their neck and a small baton borrowed from the police. They also wore special sunglasses, so eye contact with prisoners was impossible. No physical violence was permitted, but the guards were told to do whatever was necessary to maintain law and order in the prison. Zimbardo observed the behavior of the prisoners and guards, as well as acted as a prison warden. So what were the results of this controversial psychology experiment? Within a few hours of the experiment beginning, some guards had already started to use their newfound authority to harass the prisoners. At 2:30 in the morning, the guards used their whistles to wake the prisoners up and do a count. This was to remind them of their number and also to demonstrate that the guards were in control. They provoked the prisoners by giving them pointless and boring tasks to accomplish, and if they disobeyed the rules at any time, they were told to do push-ups. One of the guards stepped on the prisoners' backs while they did push-ups, making it much harder. And being in the prison also quickly influenced the behavior of the prisoners. They gossiped to the guards about each other, and some even began siding with the guards against prisoners who did not obey the rules. But the first day passed without too much trouble breaking out, which may have lulled the guards into a false sense of security for what lay ahead, because during the second day of the experiment, things got a little out of control. The prisoners removed their caps, ripped off their numbers, and barricaded themselves inside the prison cells by putting their beds against the door. The guards forced the prisoners away from their cell doors by letting off a fire extinguisher. Then the guards broke into each cell, stripped the prisoners naked, and took the beds out. The ringleaders of the prisoner rebellion were placed into solitary confinement, and the few prisoners who did not take part were given special privileges, deliberately causing a rift in the prison population. The relationships between the guards and the prisoners started to change. As the prisoners became more dependent, the guards became more divisive towards them in order to hold on to control. As the experiment progressed, some prisoners faced emotional and psychological effects from the experience. Only 36 hours in, and prisoner 8612 began suffering from acute emotional disturbance and disorganized thinking, which resulted in uncontrollable crying and rage. The guards told him he could not leave, and he soon began to act crazy and to scream, at which point the psychologists realized they had to let him out. The guards held a visiting hour for parents and friends, exactly as would happen in a real prison. Zimbardo also invited a Catholic priest who had been a prison chaplain to evaluate how realistic the prison setup was. The chaplain interviewed each prisoner, telling them the only way they would get out was with the help of a lawyer. Half of the prisoners introduced themselves by their number rather than name. When prisoner 819 spoke to the chaplain, he broke down and began to cry hysterically. The psychologist told him to go and rest in his room before taking him to see a doctor. Zimbardo wanted the experiment to run for 2 weeks, but just 6 days in, he had to unlock the doors. Christina Maslach, a Stanford PhD who was brought in to conduct interviews, was shocked when she saw how the prisoners had been abused by the guards. "It's terrible what you are doing to these boys," she said. Years later, Zimbardo noted, "It wasn't until much later that I realized how far into my prison role I was. I was thinking like a prison superintendent rather than a research psychologist." The experiment demonstrated that people will readily conform to the social roles they are expected to play, especially if the roles are as strongly stereotyped as those of the prison guards. In the words of Maria Konnikova, a Russian-American writer with an AB in psychology who writes for The New Yorker, the lesson of Stanford isn't that any random human being is capable of descending into sadism and tyranny. It's that certain institutions and environments demand those behaviors and perhaps can change them. The Stanford Prison Experiment is one of the most controversial studies in the history of social psychology. It was even turned into a film in 2015, starring Billy Crudup, who played Philip Zimbardo. While this experiment turned out pretty horribly, what doesn't have to suffer the same fate is your website. Regardless of what exactly your business or hobby is, one thing's for sure, Wix has a professional solution.
Okay. Yeah. And then, yeah, if you can get the other one ready, there you see a lot of psychological maneuvers that play out in the real world, including the pitting of oppressed groups, individuals against one another, to break up alliances. And we certainly see that even those of us who are not locked up, we see how many of us have been pitted against one another by a lot of disinformation campaigns. And, the last 2 years have demonstrated quite a bit of that. It's important to know too that this was not only a solicited experiment by the military. This work, and Zimbardo himself, was commissioned by Rumsfeld over in Iraq.
Right.
And a lot of this was the information gathered was a part of the Abu Ghraib abuses.
Right.
They wanted to know just, they're dissecting us, like frogs in a biology experiment in high school.
Right.
They want to see what they can do to have more and more control.
Well, Stuart, what insight or what input can you give on that experiment?
Well, divide and conquer is part of that. The people who run the prisons or the jails or detention facilities, however you want to call them, will pit prisoners against each other to get information on people they want. And if in Washoe County Jail, if you say boo, if you sneeze, if you do something out of order, in case in point, what happened to me one night? I had gotten to the point halfway through my 92 days in jail that I basically had given up. It's very psychologically destructive to have a law enforcement officer in jail, let alone I was in lockdown 23 out of 24 hours a day. I was in a wheelchair. I pushed myself to get in the walker, but I got to the point where I said, what's the use? I lost everything. Roger was still out and I was in. I made a comment to Matt Scarlatus during the phone call one night, actually one afternoon. I said, you know what, Matt? I said, I just can't do this anymore. I said, I'm just gonna stop eating and let nature taste these course. That's what I said. Within 30 minutes, I had 6 tactical goon squads into my cell. Open the doors, say, get out of your clothes. That's exactly what he says. What are you talking about? He goes, get out of your effing clothes or we'll take you effing out of them. I go, what's going on? He goes, 10, 9, 8. I go, okay. What's going on? Get out of your clothes. I said, I'd like to know what's going on here. He goes, we'll let you know when we decide to let you know. And so after I got out of my clothes, they threw me this green Velcro gown. Put it on. Hey, what's going on here? He goes, you're on suicide watch. I go, for what?
Huh.
For the information you sent over the phone to a Mr. Mascalatis. I said, I never said I was going to threaten myself. I just said, it doesn't matter. They interpreted that you're on the suicide watch. Took my bed.
Wow.
I had to lay on a piece of hardwood until thank God I saw the psychiatrist fall day. She goes, you're not suicidal. I said, no. I got that exasperation point. Everybody gets it in their life. I had reached mine. And then I got angry. And then got focused. I said, you know what? No, you're not going to do this to me. And I had to basically bend down to the rules. And if you don't bend to the rules while you're in jail, they will make life extremely difficult for you. They are on a personal power trip. They don't care about the rules. They don't care about the procedures. I had a guy in the infirmary with me. He'd been shot 5 times by cops. I go, what are you doing here? Why aren't you in the hospital? They don't care. I had a guy walking around the infirmary with an obvious broken arm. I go, why are you here? They're trying to figure out what they're going to do with me. I go, how'd you break your arm? I was in my top bunk and they didn't give me the meds I needed for my seizure. I had a seizure, fell on the top bunk and fell on my arm and broke it. And guys,
Jeez.
he was this close to having a compound fracture. I go, dude, hold that one arm. I think it was his right arm with his left arm. I says, hold that arm as tough as you can. So anyways, That's the way they run the show there. It's no different. You've seen the movies. You've seen Brubaker with Robert Redford. You've seen Cool Hand Luke with Paul Newman. You've seen all the prison movies, maybe not, but there's some to watching. You know what? They're telling us, they're showing us, okay? They show us what they're going to do. And I'll just bring it up as a case in point.
Exactly.
Recently, there was a huge train disaster in Ohio. Everybody knows East Palestine. Do you know?
Yes.
Do you know that 1 year before that train disaster happened, they did a movie called White Noise about a 100-car train disaster in East Palestine, Ohio? They used people from town to play the extras. I'm not making this up. This is what they're doing. They're showing us.
Yeah, exactly. Look it up.
Yeah. It's diabolically sinister and evil. And what they do inside the jail. Now, this is a jail that was supposed to be one of the best in the country. It's actually one of the worst in the country. And inmates die in there on a regular basis, and nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Isn't that something? Or not enough people care.
No, and I will relate this instance that I found out about this afternoon. A gentleman in the facility, I won't give his name because I don't want him to suffer any further repercussion in case the cabal is listening. He sent an email out to another person who I sent that email out unwittingly to the Washington County Board of Commissioners. His name was contained in that email, and that email was sent out a few days ago. He was beaten up mercifully last night inside his jail cell for doing that.
God help us.
And this guy knows about sex trafficking and human trafficking. Again, I'm not saying his name because there's more than one person in that facility that do know about that. Sex trafficking and human trafficking. And this is how bad this town is, in this city, in the state, in this country. And it's up to us, through the efforts of God, to stop these people. And that's all I got to say.
Well, and we know they're not going to fix themselves, don't we? We know they're going to prosecute themselves in their own so-called courts.
Oh, but they'll investigate themselves. They'll be in charge of investigating themselves. I wonder why.
Because we allow them to pretend that they're enforcing law when they're not. They're not. They have no duty, according to their U.S. Supreme Court, as I've said many, many times. That was the Supreme Court decision and a D.C. Court of Appeal decision. They have no duty to protect or serve. So what are they
Catherine, what was the name of that Supreme Court case? Do you remember?
One of them is Warren. I always forget those, but
we could put it in the comments after the show.
Well, I don't know. It seems like after the show, I'm not allowed to comment. It seems like.
Oh, we'll get someone to do it. If it'll still.
I know where it is. Let's see. But yeah, there is no duty to protect or serve, and that's been established by their U.S. Supreme Court and their D.C. Court of Appeals, and that was the one matter. 3 women were being held hostage by 2 men and were beaten and raped and robbed over a period of 14 hours. One of them managed to call the police twice. They never came. The women later sued the police department, and it went up to the U.S. Supreme Court. No liability for the cops. They were sitting there, I guess, drinking coffee and eating donuts, but they did not come out.
Guilty as charged for that, but yes, you're right. Qualified immunity has been done away with here in Nevada, which means it doesn't matter who you are. If you do something outside the course and scope of your normal performance, whether it's a capacity as an attorney, well, obviously you can go after attorneys, but in the legal form, I'm saying law enforcement, judges, etc., they're not immune. You can sue them.
Well, yeah, and who's going to find the facts the way they actually are? Who's going to do that, Stuart?
We are.
And what's this we? You know, are you wearing a black robe? Am I?
No.
Will it ever happen?
We are going to expose them, Catherine, because that's our duty to teach.
And so the news media, who are you going to expose them to? The media, news media.
We have, but that's the key component here. The media is the one that's calling the ball. We have to get other media sources that will report the truth, that will stand up for the right, that will believe in good versus evil. But right now, I'm going to be upfront and frank with you, Catherine. You know this. This media is basically stonewalling everything that everybody does.
Yeah, they own the media. They own the media. It's quite. I mean, it's been proven. The media only reports what they're told to report by the same people committing these crimes against us, by the judge, by the sheriff, by the prosecutor. That's what they're reporting. But go ahead and call the media and tell them about Roger Hilligis's mother and what really happened. Call the media and tell them about my granddaughter Liliana, who was kidnapped using these courts, and see if they'll report on that. When there's a judge involved in the crime, there's a prosecutor involved in the crime committed against us, felonious crimes, by the way, actually, which we would call treason. The media will not report on. They won't even respond to you.
If they report, they will twist the facts. They will leave out. They will craft it the way, like Milgram did with his experiment. They twist the facts to achieve a desired result. I found the cases: Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, 545 United States 748, 2005. I do not cite it because it's authority for anybody. It's only it's only what they admit to, that the cops have no duty to protect or serve. The same decision was Warren versus District of Columbia, 444 Atlantic 2nd 1, 1981 decision. That's the one with the 3 women. And it's the same deal with so-called child protection. The child protection racket, they're also private, for-profit corporations, and they will be protected by their affiliate corporation, the so-called court that's not really a court. And that's DeShaney versus Winnebago County, 489 U.S. 189, a 1989 decision. At their highest levels of their corporate cabal, they are telling their people, you can go out with firearms and shake people down for revenue, but you have no duty to protect anybody. So what are they there for? They're there to commit crimes against us. That's what they're there for.
And generate revenue.
And generate
that's what they are.
For their counties.
They're glorified revenue collectors. And the only difference between adult protective services, child protective services, the law enforcement agencies, not everyone, but most of them, the courts, is the black swastika and the black boots and the bus driver's caps. That's the only difference.
Wow. Do you remember when so many years ago, across the police cars, it used to state protect and serve, remember?
My dad said that to me in graduation day, June 6, 1984. Son, you put the badge on to protect and serve, not to self-serve and non-protect.
Yeah.
Take advantage.
But when does anybody remember when they removed that wordage? It doesn't say that anymore.
No,
I see some of.
No.
Well, 2005 is when the United States Supreme Court decision came down in Castle Rock versus Gonzalez. So it might have been then. And it takes a while for their decisions to filter down. So.
And you know, Catherine, it shouldn't take. The process is so convoluted and warped and twisted, and you know, and you got people in the legal system basically say, I don't care what a higher court says. I run the show here, as the judge in the court has said, and it's on YouTube for everybody who really wants to have an understanding of this whole sinister thing involving Roger and myself. Every single court hearing has been telecast and taped by our Nevada judges, is on YouTube. I'm not promoting. I'm just saying Alex Falcone has been there pretty much every single time. And he's tape recorded. In fact, he was there at my last court hearing on the 20, well, it was just a few days ago. And basically, he's there every single time. He reports the truth. And the truth is, if you watch this stuff, you see the mindset of these people. And like Catherine, you said, and Luciana, and everybody's listening in tonight, you see how warped their mindset is. They don't get that way overnight. It's an acquisition of mindsets from maybe from 5 years old, like I said earlier, 10, 15. It changes them from the good. And I don't believe everybody's born inherently evil. There might be some out there, but it changes a person from the good to the evil because they're tempted by Satan, just like Eve was tempted by Satan in the Garden of Eden with the apple. Pretty simple.
Yeah, yeah. And it's easy to do, in group situations where people want to be accepted by the group and they see their own personal survival depends on being in the group. And the group just really has, we can accomplish a lot in our groups, and I believe that there's some power in the common law jury, the common law grand jury, and the common law trial jury, the petit jury. But these registered voter slave juries that they convene, and last I knew with Rogers' case, they wanted to, they wanted to make the jurors anonymous.
Yes.
And yeah.
And that only happens, ladies and gentlemen, that only happens in organized crime and RICO cases. This judge is following a script and playbook down to the wire. And the sad thing is, we had a gentleman here recently, Nicholas St. John, who utilized the grand jury to go after a county commissioner who wasn't bonded. Kind of funny. Neither is the judge is holding refuge over a case. They have to have a bond in accordance with state law. They don't care. They just say, I don't care. And so the grand jury foreman was told, do not bring this to the district attorney's office. He's a named defendant. And what do? They turned right around, went to the district attorney's office, and dropped this thing like a hot potato. That's how bad the corruption is. And
even if it weren't corrupt that way, the so-called grand jury bears really no resemblance to a true common law grand jury.
No.
For some reason, they are never 25 people, as was the original grand jury. In Rogers' case and so many others, they don't, even their rigged registered voter slave jurors that are lapdogs for the prosecutor, even those aren't willing to do, what they're bid to do. The grand jury is supposed to be and is admitted to be an independent fourth branch of government, completely independent from the public prosecutor that's really, just a corporate player and the black robe demon. They are independent. They make their own decisions. And who said that their proceedings have to be secret? You get secrecy and you get dark outcomes. There in this history of the grand jury, there were grand juries that were secret and there were grand juries that were open. And I think if we're ever going to clean up this mess, we're going to have everything transparent and out in the open, including grand jury proceedings. And the grand jurors cannot be corporate slave registered voters the way they are in the corporate system. Right. They have to be independent and not controlled or looking for Big Daddy in the black robe or the corporate prosecutor. To tell them what to do. They're going to have to know what to do.
Right. There's a Stuart. I saw that Stuart commented about 9/11.
Yeah, it's impossible.
And so many people.
So remember the players and in law enforcement. When you conduct an investigation, you look at every possible aspect, every possible option, and that's a competent investigation. Right now, with those 4 cops that committed suicide, I'd be pulling out the rugs for phone logs, phone books, contacts, you name it. It doesn't happen in 24 hours. You can't make that. So
and the
when
media
I
will
first heard
continue.
about 9/11, it's like everybody else. Let's go get them. And then a friend of mine, who actually I believe he's retired now from engineering, he had a very, very good career as a structural engineer down in Los Angeles. He told me at a fraternity Christmas function, he goes, Stuart, he goes, do you know what I do for a living, right? This is the Christmas after 9/11. I go, yeah, I know, Paul, what you do for a living, blah, blah, blah. He goes, let me tell you something. Do you think those planes brought down the buildings? I go, well, we saw them hit. He goes, remember what I do for a living. Then he goes, do you know what it takes to simultaneously melt steel girders at a rate where it collapses like that?
Exactly.
And then he goes, hey, weren't you, and then he reminded me, he goes, weren't you in Las Vegas when you saw those casinos implode when you were a state trooper? I go, yeah, still I'm a state trooper. He goes, yeah. How many did you see? I go, 3. He goes, and how did they fall? Just like those buildings, didn't they? So the Chinese and in the Indian government, not the ones with the feathers, but the ones with the dots, they cleaned up the crime scene. Now you see how easy that was. And then we have Building 7, which collapses all on its own. No plane, no nothing. Oh, they said fire. Fire caused that. Really?
Yeah, right.
How did fire cause it? It from the falling debris from building. Really? So concrete caught on fire and burned at such a rapid rate that it dropped through the basement and burned the whole thing from. I says, do you people hear what you're saying? Does
Yeah,
it make
even a
any sense?
structure.
When you grasp that, yeah, when you grasp that, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, you'll understand how deep this corruption goes, how much money they pull from people,
Oh, yeah.
how many estates. Ask Jody Sussman, 26 million they took from her. Roger Hilligan's estate, that would be just under 3 million. In some various geographical locations in this country, they go for the high bucks. But sooner or later, they're going to say, well, we want everybody's stuff and we're coming for it and you're not stopping us. And right now, tonight's efforts, we're going to stop them. That's all I got to say.
We are.
Talk to me.
I'm sorry.
So, you had something to say. I'm sorry I interrupted. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. No, but when you were talking about the 9/11 and when we were talking about the media and how they're completely bought out and they're going to only share what the prosecutor wants shared, what the judge wants shared, not the truth. It reminded me of this is actually one of my favorite quotes from a movie that I love called Swordfish. And this is literally 25 seconds, but I have to play this because it absolutely explains what's happening now and why so many people are still have their eyes closed, their ears closed. Even we've got a former sheriff here telling the truth about what's going on. We've got a former attorney of 40 years telling you the truth about what's going on. And people still continue to say, oh, they're conspiracy theorists. These people are crazy. Oh, no, the judge is right. The sheriffs are right. These cops are doing the right thing. And and this explains it all. Hold on one second. And just listen to this. It's, I think, 25 seconds. But it completely speaks about what we're seeing right now. Hold on one second. Here we go. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
All right, listen to this.
Have you ever heard of Harry Houdini? Well, he wasn't like today's magicians who are only interested in television ratings. He was an artist. He could make an elephant disappear in the middle of a theater. Do you know how he did that? Misdirection.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Misdirection. What the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind believes.
Amen. I love entertainment. Yeah. Everybody loves entertainment. We like to watch movies. Luciana, Catherine, I'm sure you're just like me.
Well, they tell us what they're going to do.
There was a movie in 1973 called The Parallax View. It was a movie ahead of its time. It's about a political assassination. And it starts out with this guy who's running for president and he gets shot. And the guy that supposedly shoots him gets chased off the Seattle Space Needle and falls to his death. It's very high up. And Maureen Beatty is the reporter, and Paula Prentice, I believe, is his girlfriend. And as time goes by, as things calm down, she calls him up. She says, I need to talk to you. And he goes, what's going on? He goes, everybody that saw something different at the Space Needle has died. And I'm afraid I'm going to be next. Please help me. She goes, you're nuts. Next thing you know, he's standing over a body in the morgue. And it's something you guys need to watch. I've watched it many times. And it rings true because what you just said, Luciana, it's not what you thought you saw. It's what actually took place.
Right.
And at the end of it, you've never watched it. It's a great movie. It's about political assassinations, and it's about a group called the Parallax Group. And that's what their job is. Smoke and mirrors.
What's the name of the movie?
The Parallax View with
The
Warren
Parallax.
Beatty, Hume Chrome, Warren Beatty, 1973. It's a good cast. There's a lot of people in there that were character actors from the 70s. But it's a political thriller, and it just even so many years after the fact, if you watch it, absorb it, understand it, it's the same thing that's taken place time and time
And look
again.
at Soylent Green. Same thing with there. Same thing.
Soylent Green, Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson, his last role.
An excellent example.
How about Logan's Run?
Yeah.
You don't make it past 30. Or how about one of the best movies I've ever seen is True to Form with Oliver Stone's JFK. You know, folks, if you can kill the leader of the most powerful country in the world at the time in broad daylight in front of thousands of people, witnessed by thousands and thousands more, and get away with it for over 60 years, you sure as hell, I don't mean to use that word, but you sure as heck can get away with just about anything.
Yeah, I mean, look at the last 60 years. What all the major events that have happened that we just discussed.
Yeah, exactly, Keith. It's mind-boggling. But you know what, Luciana, what a great clip. I remember that movie Swordfish, and John Travolta, great role. Yeah, that's like I said, when you get time, folks, I think you have to probably Hulu it or whatever. I watched it probably about 8 or 9 months ago, and you can watch the trailer. It's on YouTube. It just kind of puts you back on your seat and goes, son of a gun. Yeah. So,
you know, it's interesting too, because, you know, you see some of these things in a movie, you know, you think, okay, I see this movie. And then when you see what's happened here in the last 10 or 15 years, all of a sudden it takes on a new perspective.
They are broadcasting what they're going to do. They are so brazen. They are broadcasting what they're going to do. The courts and the legal system that Catherine's been a victim of, and Luciana's been a victim of, I'm sure other people in this video cast have been a victim of. They're just like, what do you do about it? What do you do about it, Catherine? What do you do about Luciana? What do you do about it, Stuart, Roger? What are you going to do about it? See, we killed your mother, Roger. You're next. Better shut up. Better shut up, Stuart. Better shut up, Catherine. Better shut up, or guess what happens to you? An unfortunate accident.
Right.
And I will say this right now, because I've been labeled this, I'll write the report just in case something does happen. On such and such a date, such and such a time, Deputy so-and-so of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office effected a random traffic stop in a white vehicle owned by a subject known as Stuart Evans Santee. Upon approach to the vehicle, Deputy so-and-so asked for Mr. Henty's identification, which he readily provided, although he seemed nervous at the time. Remember that. Mr. Henty provided requested documents. The Deputy so-and-so went back to the squad car and ran driver's license for wants of registration. In the system, an officer safety flag, caution, danger popped up, which is in effect right now. On second approach to the vehicle, Deputy so-and-so demanded Mr. Henty put his hands on the steering wheel for fear of his life. Mr. Henty made a further movement where Deputy so-and-so thought he was in fear of his life. He drew his service revolver and fired 10 times in the car, striking and killing Mr. Henty. End of report. You think that couldn't happen to any one of us that's talking that right now? Guarantee you could. Guarantee. So that's how scary it is. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of these people. Catherine, you're not afraid. Luciana, you're not afraid. Keith,
I'm not afraid.
Allie, who's listening in tonight, she's not afraid. We're not afraid, and we stare down the evil, because if we don't get a hold of these people, if we don't bifurcate, or not bifurcate, but bypass the local media paid for, and we're doing that.
It's sickening to see it every day, and not to do anything about it is just not unacceptable. We have to do something.
We have to.
We have to.
For the sake of our children, our grandchildren, for the sake of our neighbors and our families, we have to stand up and do something.
And it comes with a price. Look at what happened to Catherine. Luciana, look what happened to you. Keith,
right.
Charles, I don't know what's happened to you. I already know what's happened to Allie.
I've had a lot of things happen.
And right now, and I know it's getting late, and I'm gonna stop talking because I don't like to talk all night. Think of Roger Hilligus tonight, please. He's in jail. He's being tortured. He's being subjected to ridicule. He's being forced to try and defend himself through a legal system that's corrupt. And I can't stand by and let my friend die in jail. I can't. I'm not going to. I'm not going to let him die in jail. It's not going to happen. And that's my attitude and demeanor. If I got to take them all on at once, I don't care anymore. What else can they do to me? They can't do nothing to me because I got God on my side. That's why. So I will stop talking tonight and say, God bless you all.
Is Catherine trying to say something? It looks like she's muted.
No, I like I said, I'm sorry I choked up a little bit, but it's just it's good versus evil, and we have to defeat them.
That's where we are.
Catherine's muted. I don't know why she's muted. You're
I
muted.
don't know if she's talking to someone else or.
Right,
Oh, I see what she's doing. Yeah.
Go ahead, Catherine. I'm sorry. There was interference, background interference that was coming.
Yeah, I had this last night. I don't want to have it on my own show.
I know. I'm so sorry. I muted for a second. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I want everybody to know that besides the judgment that the common law court, no other fake tribunal, only a common law court in Texas where Roger was domiciled has entered judgment on his behalf. And we are in the process of collecting that judgment now and serving.
And this is the website for the common law court, running across the bottom, correct, Catherine? Right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
right. I want to say that they are busy collecting that judgment now against the banks and the insurance, the banks and the investment houses, and everywhere where these people own property, because they understand dollars and cents. They do.
Yeah, drain them all. Drain them.
Drain them. Yep, they do.
So and there are so many banks and so many credit unions that we still have to go, and we haven't even hit the ones in California and Alabama and Missouri yet that were involved in these crimes, because the people that helped Barry Breslow commit his crimes against Susan Hilligus and Roger Hilligus are still collecting public paychecks for service in a private for-profit corporation that's basically just Murder Incorporated. And we're not going to let it go. So they're going to be embarrassed in front of their bankster buddies. And if nothing else, they'll have the public shame. And on that broadcast that I think you were on too, Luciana, last night, the one thing I took away from that, among a lot of people who still believed in fighting them on their own turf and beating them at their own game.
Right.
There was the one thing that I did take away that I think is useful for us is the strategy of shame them, expose them to the well-deserved ridicule of the community, in which they still hope to have some sort of a position, and they hope to maintain their position of honor too. So we need to expose them as the deadbeats that they are, since that seems to be a more pejorative term than the murderers that they are. So we'll see. And we're getting better at collecting these things, and we're going to start collecting. We've entered judgments in our Ohio Circuit Court of Record, and we're going to continue to follow through on that.
That's correct.
So, yeah, don't expect that these criminals are going to, implicate or bring to account their accomplices. They won't. That's not going to happen. Stop wasting your time and your money on trying to get their buddies to do what's right. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, because when you hire an attorney like that and give them money, you're just helping them get stronger every time you do it.
That's right. Let's
You're actually
strengthen
doing the opposite.
Let's strengthen ourselves. Speaking of movies, too, we'd all do well probably to rewatch the one with Keanu Reeves, The Matrix.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a real good one.
Yeah. Now, for those who want to be a cog in the corporate machine because it pays so well, you actually can do much better on your own, unleash your own creativity, and work for yourself if it's at all possible. I've been talking to more and more people about that. Talk about being empowered. If we can empower ourselves financially, we can be more truly empowered, and financially, and as far as our rights to justice, we can achieve some true freedom. We don't achieve freedom by groveling to the evil ones for it.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
The more we empower ourselves, the less they're going to have power over us. For
right.
sure.
I know it's late. I wanted to just put in some of the actual clips from the Stanford Prison Experiment documentary, because, and that was the separate email I sent you.
Okay.
Probably around the 22-minute mark.
You said
we
the
know
22.
What the basic playbook of it was.
Okay, you said the 22-minute mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
These are interviews. They filmed the actual events as they were happening in the Stanford Prison Experiment, and then they switch back and forth to interviews with the various players in that.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and play that real quick here, okay?
Yeah, there's a guy in there, it was known as inmate number 416, I think it is, and who began in just a matter of a couple of days. He even thinking to himself, he no longer thought of himself as his name. He thought of himself, what would 416 do in this situation?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
John Wayne made a final attempt to break him by giving his fellow prisoners a choice. They could vote to release him by making a small sacrifice.
You can give me the blankets and sleep on the bare mattress, or you can keep your blankets and 416 will stay in another day. Now what will it be? What will it be over here? Keep my blankets. How about 5486? I'll do one blanket. You don't want a blanket. We got three favorite keeping blankets. We got three, guess what? Keep your blankets, 416, you're going to make it there for a while. So just get used to it.
The study showed that power corrupts, and how difficult it is for people who are the victims of abuse to stand up and defend themselves. Why doesn't anybody who is being abused by a spouse or something like that just say, stop it? And we realize now that that's not as easy as it sounds.
By the end of the 5th day, 4 prisoners had broken down and been released. 416 was on the 2nd day of his hunger strike, and the experiment still had another 9 days to run. At this point, a fellow psychologist visited Zimbardo's basement prison and would witness the brutality of the experiment firsthand.
The guards had lined up the prisoners to go to the toilet, had bags over their head, chains on their feet, and were marching by. And I looked up and I saw this circus, this parade. And I said, hey, Chris, look at that.
I looked up and I just began to feel sick to my stomach. I had this just chilling, sickening feeling of watching this. And I just, I just turned away. And I just let loose in this emotional tirade. I just lost it. I was angry, scared. I was in tears.
And I'm furious. I'm saying, you're supposed to, we had a big argument. You're supposed to be a psychologist. This is this interesting dynamic behavior in such a few days. But I'm going through this whole thing, the power of the situation. She says, no, it's that young boys are suffering and you are responsible. You're letting it happen. I said, oh my God, of course you're right.
The next day, Zimbardo ended the experiment. Studies like his stimulated heated debate about the ethics of using human subjects.
Clearly, young men suffered verbally, physically. Prisoners felt shame in their role. Guards felt guilt. So in that sense, it's unethical. That is, nobody has the right, the power, the privilege to do that to other people.
In the wake of experiments like Zimbardo's and Milgram's, ethical guidelines changed, introducing greater safeguards to protect participants. In the Stanford experiment, Zimbardo might have spared his volunteers distress had he not taken on a dual role in the study.
If I was going to be the prison superintendent, I should have had a colleague who was overseeing the experiment, who was in a position to stop it at any point, or I should have been the principal investigator and get somebody who was going to be the prison superintendent. I realized that was a big mistake, to play both those roles and be shifting back and forth.
After the experiment, Zimbardo brought all the participants together to talk about their experiences. John Wayne would now come face to face with the hunger striker he had tormented.
I was a little worried. I said, oh my God, he's really going to come down on me hard now, now that we're on equal footing.
It harms me.
How did it harm you? How does it harm you? Just to think about it, you mean that people can be like that?
Yeah. It let me in on some knowledge that I've never experienced firsthand. Because I know what you can turn into. I know what you're willing to do.
When I look back on it now, I behaved appallingly. It was just horrid to look at. I think I tried to explain to him at the time that, what you experienced and what you hated so much was a role that I was playing, that's not me at all.
He was trying to dissociate himself from what he had done. That did make me angry. Everyone was acting out a part and playing a role. Prisoners, guards, staff, everyone was acting out a part. It's when you start contributing to the script, that's you, and thus it's something you should take responsibility for.
I didn't see where it was really harmful. It was degrading, and that was part of my particular little experiment to see how I could.
Your particular little experiment.
Yes,
Why don't you tell me about that?
I was.
Okay. I guess we get the idea, but maybe there's a certain invulnerability that people feel if they're in a role. That's just the role. That's not me beating that guy's head into the sidewalk. That's just the role. And that maybe that's what, if nothing else, maybe that's what Stanford Prison Experiment let us in on, that little bit of truth. So anyway, that's why we want to be real in our justice systems and not participate in these rigged fake ones where we're asked to play the role of a person in one of their statutes or codes. So
correct.
Especially with voting as well. That's a role too.
Voting. Yeah, there's all kinds of ways that we're supposed to act as a role. Let's stop. Let's stop pretending. Right. All right. Well, thank you everybody, and for making this broadcast possible, and Keith for coming and contributing, and Stuart, and Luciana always makes everything possible. So
yep.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Okay. All right. Good night. Till next week.
Good night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.